Welcome to FOBtv, the future of business. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict. I'm a futurist and lecturer here at TCS, and I want to welcome all of you to the show today. I'm really excited about our topic today, which is people and digital assistants and digital coworkers and all these kinds of things. And our guest today is Celia Fleischaker. Celia, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Great to be here.
Now, Celia is the Chief Marketing Officer of isolved. And I'm going to let Celia give me a little introduction. Talk to us about isolved.
Yeah, we provide a human capital management or HR platform, and we basically support close to 7 million or right around 7 million employees across the country with payroll or benefits or their needs. We work with 177,000 companies across the US, really kind of providing that support that they need to provide a better experience to their employees.
That's awesome. It's like you've said that before, Celia.
Once or twice, just once or twice.
So where are you calling in from today?
I'm in New York City. I'm in Manhattan today.
All right.
Yeah.
Is that where the office is, or is that where you reside, or?
That's home for me. Our headquarters is down in Charlotte, North Carolina, where you'll find me a fair amount of the time too.
All right. So Chief Marketing Officer. Now that is one position that, to me, I've interviewed a lot of CMOs. That role has changed dramatically, at least in my experience in talking to people. Talk to me about your experience. How's that role in that position changed over the last 5-10 years?
Yeah, it's changed a ton. You're right. For me, especially, I think for any CMO, the amount of tech that is part of that role, a lot of times a CMO's tech stack could be more significant than what the rest of the organization has, which is I think it makes the role fun. I think you've seen a change in how it's defined in some companies, whether it's brand or demand, but in a lot of companies, CMO has a larger role in the experience, both for customers and employees, which is a cool change as well. I love that idea. It's part of the reason I'm where I am today at isolved. It's been an evolution, but that's what, for me, makes marketing such a fun place to work inside of an organization.
So quick question. This is just because I dealt with this yesterday. It was overhearing this conversation. Should communication guide marketing, or should marketing guide communications?
Oh my gosh. I think that the market should guide communications and marketing, right? I think the needs of your customer and your employees guides marketing and communications. I feel like they're intertwined, but it can't be done in a vacuum, is what I'd say.
So I was just trying to catch you off guard there, but it just came to my mind because I was part of that conversation yesterday.
Yeah,
fascinating.
absolutely.
So talk to me about the hardest part of the job of a CMO right now.
I think a couple of things when you come into a role as a CMO, defining the expectation, because every company does have a definition of what they think marketing should deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And so working with the team to define, here's what success means for our company and marketing and what we can do to achieve it. So that's one thing when you come into a role, and then just understanding what the expectation is and the pace of change that goes along with that is something that makes it tough, because you have a lot of people pulling on you with the predefined expectations about what you can do for them or what you need to do, and you have to fulfill those, but at the same time keep track of what that longer term goal is: growth of the company, driving the business, and balancing the tactical with that longer term strategic.
So where do you get the most satisfaction in your work?
For me, it's the connection with our customers is, I think, really exciting, because it's where you see the fruits of everything you do, right? When you see a customer achieve that value, because as a marketer, we're always talking about ROI and what the value is that you get and having to position those solutions. Understanding and connecting with the customer makes, for me, that job much easier and much more satisfying.
How fun. So one of the things I noticed when doing research on isolved is that there's an emphasis in your content around the word people. Now, for example, you call people heroes, right? Where people heroes grow. And then you have another term, the people professionals. Now, that seems intentional. Talk to us about that.
I think it's where we grew up, right? We grew up helping employees achieve. And the people heroes are those HR leaders, kind of unsung heroes inside of an organization, that their job is to make everyone else's job and experience better. And so we focus in on not the tech, which is the tech is a means to an end for us, but it's about the people that we're supporting along that journey, whether it is the HR leader, whether it is that end user employee that's using the system. It's about people, and that's something that's pervasive, definitely in our messaging and how we talk about the organization and what we do, but also inside the organization, just our culture. It's a very people first culture, which is, it's fun.
So, Celia, I can imagine as a futurist, our heads are often 5, 10, 15 years out
Yeah.
there as part of our job. But I can imagine a time when somebody in HR will say, we've got 1,000 humans, we have 250 digital agents, and 34 automated robotic coworkers. And so that might change that mix, or maybe, I'm not even sure, because when you get a digital agent doesn't know anything. You have to train it, you have to onboard it, and you have to update it. I mean, how do you expect that, the world of isolved might change in the near future?
I think it changes so much, right? Like, I think it's both daunting and exciting at the same time. I mean, this whole notion of how many employees you support, that question is very different based on how you said it. Because as an HR leader, I'm going to support, yes, my human employees, but the training aspect of my role does come into play with digital assistants and digital coworkers. And I think it fundamentally could shift how HR operates and what they do. And it makes the role much more important, because when you have a workforce shift, when you see maybe aspects of a company or roles that you have potentially get displaced or changed as a result of the tech, how you plan for that, how you guide a company through that shift, how you develop skills training and
Mhm.
job training, it's all changing. So I think it is, yeah, scary a little bit, but exciting for the people that kind of get ahead of that curve, recognize, like you said, that this future is going to hit us, right? We're going to be there. How do I get ready for it? Because it could make the difference for my company being way more competitive and way ahead of others that I'm against or competing with in the market.
I can imagine a time when somebody might have this whole stack of job descriptions for all the different roles, and you look at them and say, they're all changing now because I need this part for a human to do this part, but I only need that for a third of the time. So maybe that job description can be shared, but that same person can be shared between 3 different job descriptions, because we now have digital agents and generative AI and all kinds of other tools that can assist in a lot of things. So it just changes the shape of different job descriptions. Does that seem like a plausible future?
Yeah, and I think it changes the conversation to talking about specific jobs, and at one job to one person, to skill sets and skills
Mhm.
that people have, and looking for certain skills, and that you might fill the needs of a company through different people who have different like it really does shift how you think about filling roles and accomplishing the jobs. And it gets even more important for organizations to start thinking about the people they have and the pool of talent that they have, and how do they better understand it, and what exists today, but what they need to develop. It really does change a lot.
Before continuing to focus on the future, let's take a pause here, because oftentimes the patterns of the past inform us about the future as well. So
Absolutely.
let's talk about COVID and what your clients saw. I mean, pre-COVID, how did the world change for your clients at iSolve kind of pre-COVID to post-COVID? What did you see from your vantage point?
Definitely have had tons of conversations about the experience with customers and what happened. And I think the shifts that you saw in workplace expectation around where you work, how does this idea of separating the personal and the professional was very blurred when people are running through the background and you're getting
Yeah.
used to working at home. And then I think the shift swung back to, we saw some people needing to come back to office. And we have a lot of companies that we work with, quick serve restaurants, they might be in healthcare. They didn't have the luxury of sending everyone home. So balancing workplace policies that would work during and post pandemic was really important. But I think some of the changes we've seen in a lot of the surveys that we do, either with HR leaders or with employees in workplaces, there's a lot more focus today on looking for a job that's personally fulfilling. Nearly 90% said that was more important than comp in a lot of situations, which really surprised me. You're seeing a lot of desire for more transparency. This was the first year where we saw employees come back and say the most important thing from a culture perspective isn't my pay, it's actually internal communications. What if someone had told me a few years ago that would be number one on someone's list, I would have been like, really? But it surpassed comp. And I
Right.
think it says a lot about what people expect in a workplace and from their employer, and that they're pushing back a little bit on what they expect from a culture and what they need, and they're willing to make a change in their role or company in order to find something that fits them better.
Oh yeah, it's hard to go back when you've had flexibility.
Yeah, it is. It
It's-
is. Yeah.
Where, when you want to grab something to eat, you just walk into the kitchen to the refrigerator and grab it, right? And
That
the
can be
dog,
bad too, right? I don't.
yeah, yes, it could be. The dog needs out in the backyard, so you let it out. All these kinds of things, and then suddenly that's taken away from you, and you're sitting in a cube. That's hard to adjust to. It's hard to go back
I
to
think
the
it's
same exact scenario.
Yeah, yes, but I also think you also see people really desiring engagement
Oh yeah,
and interaction and trying to find that. I think it depends too on like your environment at home. It can be very different from
yeah,
person to person, but I know when I do go in the office, I love that. I love that interaction. I love that face to face. And I think a lot of people, you're right, like finding, and that's why we've seen so many go hybrid, right? Like, sure, take your
yeah.
2 to 3 days at home, 2 to 3 days in the office if your business can support that. But it's different.
Oh yeah. So what are you seeing today in the trends and desires of today's employees? What are they asking for then?
I mean, I think there's a lot of discussion about employee expectations and they're rising. And one of the things we always go back with when we do hear from people about, hey, have they gotten a little, are they out of control? Where are they? And, we HR leaders came back and said, 3/4 of HR leaders said, we think employee expectations are right on. They want a good experience. They want to understand, how their job's contributing to the good of the company. And we like to talk about those expectations, but one of the things we're really careful about when we're talking about the employee expectation is talking about why delivering on that expectation makes sense to the employer, that it's just good business to deliver the right experience to your employees. Because when you start at, and this, but you start adding up the cost of losing talent, when you look at a bad experience and how that might translate to a bad customer experience. One of the things that really it surprised me a little bit when we asked about employee experience and customer experience, we just flat out asked, like, hey, how does that translate into the experience you deliver to a customer? 90% said absolutely. If I don't like the environment I'm in, or I'm having a challenging experience at work, it's going to impact what I deliver to the customer, which is, I mean, if you're a business owner or leader and you see that stat, you quickly recognize why you pay attention to employee
Yeah.
experience.
So kind of on that note, and you shared that you participate in other kind of HR related statistics and research.
Sure.
You shared some statistics with me earlier. One of them, let's just talk about each of these in turn. 65% of employees say they've suffered from burnout in the last year. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think that one is, I mean, that's kind of a wake-up call, I think, for a lot of businesses to fully understand. Is that happening in my business? More than likely, yes, with some of your employees. And then the root cause, what's causing that? And what needs to change in order to take that away? To just admit that you've suffered from burnout is a
Oh,
pretty
yeah,
big step. And to have it be, a majority of employees saying that is something you have to solve for it.
absolutely. Another one, 59% say they work when they are sick. Now, what can we learn from that number?
I I mean, for me, I went back and forth on this one because I think it kind of from what we were talking about. I think if you have employees working remotely or from home, I think you might be more apt to work when you're sick, right? You're not going into the office, you're not exposing others. So I could see that number trickling up because of that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, employees feeling they can't step away for a day when they're under the weather is something that is concerning. And that as a manager, as a leader, you want to make sure you're talking to your employees about, I mean, you should be able to do that. The business has to be able to function without individuals. And how do you make people comfortable that they're going to be able to catch back up if they take a day off or step away?
Oh, I know. I feel it because you have a phone and you can be in bed in your pajamas with a fever and somebody asks a question. It's like, well, I know the answers.
Right.
I can go in there and tell them to reschedule to next week, and here's the answer they need this, and here's the attached document. So it's so easy with the tools that we have today to just do it, even if you're in bed. But yeah, it's just an interesting dynamic.
I think and we're seeing that, right? Like, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about work-life balance, but we're
Yeah.
starting to see legislation around that and people trying to legislate that you separate. We've seen it in other countries, more so in the
Yeah.
US, but I'm curious to see how successful that will be in helping solve the solutions.
I know but we're all using personal devices for work. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, then it starts getting into a technical issue. What do you do? Just lock it off, and so it's like in its own little vault. That's
Right.
work. And this is yeah. I've seen those discussions for years on that too. So the number I think you were hinting at, 43% say they would be open to a pay cut if it meant a better work-life balance. Let's start by saying what's meant by a work-life balance.
I think it goes back like what I was saying about fulfillment, right? People are close to 90% are looking for a role that's fulfilling. I think part of being fulfilled with a job is being able to actually still be fulfilled in your personal life as well and
Mm.
having that balance. I think balance is a bit of a misnomer. I don't think there's ever a true balance. It assumes that they're equal. And I think it ebbs and flows, right? Like I think that people want balance and to be fulfilled on both personal and professional fronts, but you're never going to be 50-50. I do think I think you see a lot of employers embracing things, mental health awareness, encouraging people to have recharge days, to take breaks I think more employers are getting active in that discussion about work-life balance, which you maybe haven't seen as much in the past. And it is giving people, they feel like they have some license to step away, and we need more of that.
Another number you shared, 25% of participants say they are stuck in a toxic work environment, and that's just plain sad.
Yeah, I recognize not everyone has the ability to go out and change a role and find a new job. It is like that is sad to see because 25% on one hand, you're like, well, it's not such a big number, but really a quarter of people believe they're in a toxic environment. Is it isolated to a department or a group? Like I think HR leaders understanding the work environment and being able to improve it and help shape it into a more positive place is important. But yeah, 25% is a rough number
Wow.
to see.
And, that's one of those examples of why it's so good to have access to knowledge through digital tools, right? Because if number one, that's not normal for everyone.
No.
And there's 75% are saying they don't work in a toxic work environment. So, number one, that doesn't have to necessarily be the case.
Right.
And maybe it's easier to use our tools to find a new job that makes you happier, that has a better balance, where there's less burnout and more satisfaction, all those things. So let me just ask you, in combination, what do those statistics mean to employers? What guidance would you give employers?
I think recognizing that there is a fair amount of dissatisfaction, a fair amount of concern over how a role's going, and that these stats are things that lead to people leaving and going to a new job. And so as an employer, you want to get ahead of it, right? Understanding what's going on in your org, using things like analytics inside the systems that you have to understand maybe how much people are working, are they taking breaks, doing pulse surveys and surveys of your employees to get a better handle on how they're feeling about the company, their role, and in communication that's happening with them. There are a lot of exactly what you said in the way that there's knowledge and there are tools to find a new role. A lot of HCM systems like isolved have the ability to better understand and use technology to listen and gain knowledge about your own employees and their situation and experience so that you can take that and act on it and improve the situation.
Oh yeah, I just imagine that as more and more knowledge gets democratized,
Yep.
and so you have access to these kinds of reports. You have former employee surveys that talk about their experience working with the company. I mean, all that's going to start influencing your ability to recruit quality people. Isn't that the case?
Absolutely. If I'm going to a new company or researching an organization, I'm on Glassdoor, I'm on LinkedIn. You're looking at what they post, what they talk about. You see tenure of employees. There's so much, like you said, information out there that I think employee experience really used to be something that was inside the organization. And it's just along the lines of tech is making so many things transparent and public
Yeah.
across to others outside your organization. So you have to manage that experience more because other people have visibility to it and they know what it's like. So it impacts your ability to get new talent.
Right. And now that we're all connected via networks,
Oh,
digital networks on social media, it's not hard to reach out to somebody that works there,
yeah.
right?
How is it? Like, how to go, why did you leave?
Yeah. Or
Absolutely.
why have you been there for 13 years and why haven't you left?
Exactly.
All
Exactly.
those kinds of things make it so important there. Now, I'm going to ask you to put on your futurist hat, Celia.
Nice.
Yes, and let's look forward because as we kind of started out our show, we're talking about humans today, but very quickly there's going to be humans plus digital robotic coworkers plus digital assistants and all kinds of other tools that know us personally and can help us be more valuable and more productive. How's that
Beautiful.
change the world for your clients at ISO?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, we're kind of coming full circle here, right? About the changes that it can bring and the need to embrace that change. I think one of the things when you start talking about digital coworkers and assistants and AI, it feels very big and
Yeah.
hard to tackle. And it is bringing big change. But as an HR leader, being able to work with a partner or someone to help you break down what that path looks like for me today, for my HR leaders and the team, I know they're spending 50% or more of their time on like admin tasks. Right there is like that's golden for AI and an AI assistant. What can we do? Can you put in like a conversational virtual assistant to help answer questions and get that off your plate so that you can move on to more strategic things, thinking about how would a digital coworker play? I think from a development perspective, it really there's a shift there. What is the learning, the skills training that I need to put in place so people are ready for shifts in their jobs or changes in what they do? There, analytics, just understanding what kind of work is happening, where is it happening, who's doing what, how are they performing, what do I look like from, a DE&I perspective, where do I need to improve? There's so many things that tech, AI, analytics, data, they bring to the table for HR and for the business that can provide visibility and understanding so that you can make those bigger shifts in your org 2, 3, 4 years down the road. But it's having that path to get there. I do think, like, as a future, right, you're talking these big sweeping changes, which are very important, and they're absolutely going to happen. As an HR leader, what are the 5 steps to get to that point? I know I'm not going to make that leap right away. And there's a lot of tech that can help. I know there's a fear of certain technology, but I think it's so much is on from a scale perspective, the help, the ability, the improvements, the benefits are far outweigh the fear
Oh, yeah.
factor.
So it just occurred to me, so the HR professionals, that's an acronym, the HR, human resources, is it going to have to change to human? So HDA, robotic coworkers, RO.
Find a whole new category on me. Yeah, maybe down the road, I think it becomes bigger.
Yeah. In a way, it almost seems like the automation and the digitization of communications and agents and chatbots, they're going to force us to learn more about ourselves as humans. Because if we want a customer service digital agent to
Right.
be empathetic, to be emotionally intelligent, to be understanding, then we're going to have to know what that means for ourselves too.
From a training perspective,
Yeah.
or
And like, what does that mean to us? And what do we want to feel like? And how do we want to be treated? How do we want to be understood and respected when we are in trouble with a customer service issue? And then once we start learning about ourselves and how we want to be treated, we've then got to train our agents to reflect that, right?
Right. I mean, and I came from the world of customer service and now in employees. And I think exactly what you're saying. When you're in the middle of it, when you're needing help, and think about it from an employee perspective, when I need an answer, I need my W-2. I need to know
Yeah.
something about payroll. Like, it's so urgent and so personal. And the last thing you want is to be interacting with a bot that it's a bot, but I still want them to be nice and accurate and smart. And that training is so important in terms of tech and how the AI learns to be empathetic and
Wow.
responsive.
I think what we've learned here is that there's a lot of change on the horizon
Absolutely.
and a lot of work for us to do. So there's not going to be any shortage of work.
No, it doesn't feel like it.
It's just going to look different and be different. Wow. Celia, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise and knowledge.
Oh, thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
All right. And I want to thank the audience and all the listeners out there. Thanks for joining us today. Stay tuned for more.